Hi there, welcome to this Kaplan Masterclass on the secrets of marking exams. This is designed to cover all sorts of different qualifications, and we'll be looking at numerical papers, but also the more wordy papers. And just to give you a little bit of insight as to how the examiner's mind works, and also a few tips that markers have given us to make sure your scripts are as good as possible and to try and get as many marks as you possibly can in your exam. So in this session, we're firstly going to look at some examiner tricks, so things the examiner loves to do to try and trip you up or throw you off, so that we're not going to be fazed by it. Secondly, we'll look at some top tips from a marker, so speaking to markers, gaining some insight as to what they would recommend that students do to try and get as many marks as they can. And finally, we'll just think about some examiner's comments and what you can practically do to try and achieve as many marks as you can. So firstly, examiner tricks. One of the first tricks that examiners are taught when they're writing exams is to put the hard bits first within a question. So they do this, and the idea is that they might try and throw you off a little bit, might try and put you off. It also adds a bit of time pressure because people spend far too long on that first bit. But the reason they do it mainly is to try and sort out those people who have the confidence and the ability to be able to cope with this and the good exam technique, and filter off those people who, with something that's slightly obscure or slightly tricky, suddenly just can't do the exam. So it tends to sort of be quite polarizing in that the better students cope absolutely fine, whereas the poorer students, the weaker students, tend to do badly, and therefore it creates that separation, which is what exams are designed to do. So here's a little example of this. So just a silly example, but part A, like what's 78 to the power of 7.2 divided by log 2 multiplied by the cube root of 48.3. I'm sure you can all go away and do that, but it's quite a lot of work, isn't it? It's quite complicated. A lot of people go, no, log 2, how do I do that on my calculator? Oh no, I'm sure we didn't do this. Oh dear, that's really complicated. And it throws people, puts you off, and your confidence takes a knock, and you go, oh no, where am I going to go from here? Let's just look at part B. What's the answer to part A divided by 2? Oh, hang on a second. I can do that. That's nice and straightforward. So what you've sometimes got to do is just think, right, as long as you're aware of this, the examiners are told to put difficult questions first. Just think, right, I'm not going to spend too long on part A. I'll give it a go. I'll see how far I get. I'll show my workings. I'll do what I can. I can do 78 to the power of 7.2. I know how to do that. It's that log 2 bit that's throwing me, but then I think I can do a cube root. Okay, I'm all right with that. So I'll do what I can in part A. I'll get something. Then I can do part B. And don't forget, in all these qualifications, you will still get the marks in part B. It doesn't matter what your number is in part A. If you do part B correctly, you will still get those marks. So you just need to keep going. And if you're completely stuck on the first bit of the question, assume a number, make something up. Say, all right, part A, well, obviously that's 100. So I'm just going to write, assuming part A is 100, part B divided by 2, 50. There you go. You've got your marks for part B. So just keep going with these exams. A lot of people get thrown. And again, they're designed to do that, but we're not going to do that. We're going to be fine. And just think, I remember that trick. I know what you're doing to me here. You're trying to put me off. I'm not going to let this affect me. I'm going to have a quick go at part A. I'm going to do part B. And then I'm going to move on to the next question, which is probably then a lot nicer and a lot more normal. So that's the first trick that they will throw at you. The next thing they might do is to test some fringe topics. So these are these topics that are on the edge of the syllabus, maybe not tested all that frequently, maybe those niche little bits that were sort of at the back of your mind that you might have looked at once or twice, and you think, that never comes up, don't need to worry about that. The examiners do this to try and get good coverage of the syllabus. So make sure they are testing these. It is in the syllabus, so it is absolutely fair game that they do test it. And it's also in there again to try and see who can cope. Can you cope with this and try and throw you off a little bit maybe, but have you got the technique to be able to do it? The important thing with this is that lots of students will do absolutely nothing at all on these. They'll go, right, I've seen that question. I can't remember that. I'm not going to write anything. I won't bother. If you write nothing, you will get 0 marks. Definitely. You're not going to be able to get marks for some blank space on your answer. So what we've got to do is give it a go. And just as another, again, example, This is from the FM syllabus, but explain what is meant by a momentum factor and explain how it could be used to find the cost of equity. Think, right, okay, momentum factor. What on earth is that? Again, this is in the financial management syllabus, and a lot of people go, right, cool, I don't remember that. And you think, right, where does that come in? But then it says about how it could be used to find the cost of equity, right? I know how to do the cost of equity, and I know about CAPM and all this. And what is momentum? Momentum is all about it's sort of how well a company is potentially developing, the sort of the movement they've got, the growth potentially that they've got going on. So let's talk about that a bit. Momentum. I'll get something down about momentum. So it's looking at recent trends, how they're performing. Maybe we could maybe mention that. And to get the cost of equity, well, we can use CAPM. So maybe it's a factor that the more momentum a company has in a positive way, potentially the more that they're going to have to pay their shareholders. So maybe the increase in cost of equity. You can get some sensible sort of guesses down, can't you? And you know what momentum is, you know what the cost of equity is. So let's get something down. Now, the markers will be willing to give marks here for almost anything. I mean, I don't want to say they'll give marks for absolutely anything, but they're going to be probably quite generous because a lot of students won't have even answered this. So if you've just explain what momentum's about and talked about the cost of equity, you're probably going to get some marks. So get something sensible down, write something. The key thing in this, again, really top tip in all this marking stuff is that there's no negative marking in these exams that we do at Kaplan. So they can't take marks off you if it's wrong. So you might as well try. Get some stuff down. Absolutely worst case, you get 0 out of 4 or 5 or however many marks this is. Right, never mind. But at least you've tried. So just get something down and you may well get some marks. Those markers will be desperate to give you marks for something sensible here. Now, another trick that examiners often will try is to ask a question backwards. Particularly relevant, this one in maybe the more objective tests, the sort of multiple choice questions, but you can see it in the longer form questions as well. For example, rather than just a normal straightforward variance that you might see, right, working out what is the material price variance. What they might do is say, right, here you go. Here is the material price variance. It's £300 adverse. If we bought this at this price, what was the actual price paid per kilogram? You think, oh, hang on. I'm used to doing this the other way. I'm used to knowing what the actual price is, knowing what the standard price is, and then therefore having to work out that material price variance. And that tests a deeper understanding. It tests your ability to be able to think backwards and just, right, let's just think logically and work through it. The key thing with this, again, is just to get something down, just keep trying and just make sure you're really clear with your workings so the markers can see your thought process. Oh, hang on, right, if 10 kilograms of materials were purchased at a standard price of 40, what was the actual price? So, right, we're expecting 10, so times that by 40, that's £400. Okay, right, we can work out from that, and so on. And you can try and hopefully, figure it out and just get something down again, and hopefully you'll be fine. But just watch out for that and just make sure you are sort of prepared, especially in those objective test questions, the multiple choice ones. They do love mixing it up a little bit. Now, one of the most common tricks we see is for examiners to include some red herrings. And what we mean by this is information that isn't relevant to the question. And in a lot of exams, you then need to state why you've ignored things. So again, a subject that I teach is financial management, and something we have to ignore there is this thing called a sunk cost. Anything that's in the past, we don't need to include, it's not relevant. But they always throw them in. And you just need to write a little sentence saying, right, I'm going to ignore that cost because it's sunk. It's not relevant. And so just make sure if there are some things in there that you know you don't need, that you just explain why you've left them out. So for example, right, what's 1,000 divided by 4? And you look at that, right, okay, right, fine, 250, I can do that one. Oh, but hang on, the tax rate's 25%, and I need to assume there are 365 days in a year. Why have they told me that? And then today's Tuesday, but tomorrow it's not. Right? Why are they telling me it's Tuesday? And you start doubting yourself, don't you? Thinking, well, do I need to take off tax? 1,000 divided by 4? Do I need to take off tax from that? Or why is it different on a Tuesday? Do we do maths differently on a Tuesday? They will deliberately put things in there to make you doubt yourself. So again, it's just a case of being aware of that and just thinking, right, I'm not falling for your tricks, Mr. or Mrs. Examiner. I am just going to do what I know, and I'll stick to that, and I'll be absolutely fine. So there are 4 common tricks that examiners play on you. So hopefully we are wise to those now, and we know not to fall for them. Now let's think from a marker's perspective. What would markers say? And don't forget, these markers will have done exams at some point, and they know the pressure you're under and everything else. So having spoken to a lot of markers and marked scripts myself and so on, there are a few tips here that hopefully will be useful for you. Now, the first one is to never delete your answer. So most exams these days are done on the software, so a software of some description. Again, similar to the point I made earlier, if you delete your answer, it's definitely getting 0, isn't it? You're not getting any marks. But especially the wordy subjects, you might as well leave it in, because there's no negative marking. Okay, you might put it towards the end if you're thinking, oh, I'm not sure if that's right or not. But I'll leave it in. If you just keep writing in these exams, you will get enough marks eventually to pass. So just leave things in, and maybe put it towards the bottom. Even to the extreme that if you've done a full calculation, you think, I think I might have done that whole method wrong. If you leave that there and then do another full calculation the way you think you should have done it, if only one of them's right and the other one's completely wrong, you'll still get the marks. They can't take marks off you for doing the other one wrong. So again, leave it in, and hopefully you'll pick up some credit. Now, another really nice tip from the markers is to explain numbers as you go. So as you're doing your workings, let's just explain to the markers what's going on. I think often we assume that markers, they'll know what I mean. So here's an example of some workings. So I've done some workings to show how I've got £300 as an answer. And what I've done is I've done 100 divided by 100 times 2, then divided that by 4, added 10, then I've times that by £5 to get 300. And the markers might go, right, okay, at least you have shown some workings. You've not just written 300. But just to explain how to turn that into something that's much easier to follow. For example, in answer B, what I've done instead is just put a few words in, just explaining what I'm doing. Right, we've got 100 staff times 2 locations. We need 200 staff. Divide that by 4 shifts. Right, we've got 50 staff per shift. Add on your 10 admin staff, you've got 60. It's £5 per shift. So we've got £300 staff cost for this particular shift. And suddenly that has become a much, much nicer answer. And again, markers will be more willing to give you marks. If you make a mistake, no problems. Okay, I can see, right, actually, it should have only been 8 admin staff and you've included 10, but I can see what you've done there, so I'll give you more credit. So much, much easier to mark and much nicer to look at. So just almost keep discussing what you're doing as you go through, and markers do really like that. The third tip from a marker, and the final one we've got here, is not to neglect the written bits. Again, so common in the more numerical subjects. So the likes of financial management, one of the subjects I teach. And this is a question really common actually in a financial management exam is to calculate the NPV of a project. And then maybe part B, calculate the IRR, the internal rate of return. Fine. So 2 quite technical numerical calculations. And you guys love those. You go, right, great. I love an NPV. I'll get my years. I'll get all my sales and all this stuff sorted. Brilliant. I love it. And then you do those and you do your IRR. And then some people just don't even bother with the wordy bit. That part C there, discuss the advantages and disadvantages of the techniques used for 6 marks. And some people just go, I've got my answer. I'm happy with my NPV and my IRR. Let's move on. But if you look at that, of that, we got 6 marks on that. So we've got, that's half of your NPV there, that you're throwing away if you don't do part C. Or what people do is they don't spend enough time on it. They'll spend so long on the calculations in part A and B, they won't get onto it, or they'll do a token effort in part C, maybe just a few words. But actually, a lot of the time, these wordy bits are firstly quicker than doing the calculations in terms of the amount of time it takes to get your marks. And secondly, they're often easier. Advantages and disadvantages of NPV is something that I'm sure you will have covered if you're doing an FM exam. So it's actually quite easy. So what some people might do is actually do part C first. I'm going to get that down. I'm going to get that sorted, get those 6 marks in the bag, and then I'll go away and tackle the calculations. So just don't miss them. And again, markers are very aware of the fact that a lot of students don't bother with these wordy bits. And if you get something down. Yeah, short sentences, 6 marks. You're looking for 6 different things. Short, concise sentences. You'll probably pick up some marks. So don't forget those. Okay, so hopefully some nice insight from markers. A few things to watch out for. The third thing I wanted to mention today was to make you aware of a resource that a lot of students don't use, but I think is so powerful in terms of enhancing your answers in the exam, which is the examiner comments from previous exams. So most qualifications do this. They publish some examiner comments, which are remarks from examiners on how students performed on particular papers or maybe particular topics. And again, it just gives you an idea inside the mind of the markers. And I know here we're saying all this is all about secrets of the marking process, but actually, yeah, these examiners, they want you to do well. They want you to come up with some good scripts. So they're actually quite transparent often, but students ignore it. They don't use this resource. So for example, this is an extract from a recent FM exam for the ACA qualification, so the ICAW. But again, you can see these often for the CIMA, for the case studies, and for ACCA exams as well. You get the examiner reports, and they tell you, look, here you go. Most students or most candidates perform well on this. Number of people made errors relating to inflation and so on. So you look at that and go, okay, right, I need to make sure I'm doing my inflation correctly. I need to go away and doing that. And again, they give you a bit of insight as to which areas students do poorly on and which ones they do well on, which hopefully will help you when you're reviewing these answers. Right, that's it from me. Hopefully you found that useful. Best of luck with your studies. Make sure that you're thinking, right, why is the examiner asked me this? How can I make it really easy to mark? And if you've always got that in the back of your mind, you're going to do really well in these exams. So best of luck.